Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Thank you all for joining us. Welcome to today's Trade, Travel, and Tourism Committee. I'm joined by Mr. Krikorian and Mr. Bonnet. And I'm Chair Joe Buscaino. Thank you for joining us. First and foremost, conformity with the Governor's Executive Order N29-20 issued on March 17th, 2020, and due to concerns over COVID-19, this LA City Council Committee meeting will be conducted telephonically. The audio for this meeting is broadcast live on the internet at lacity.org or by calling 213-621-CITY. Members of the public who would like to offer public comment on the items listed on the agenda should call 669-254-5252 and use meeting ID number 161-863-2891, and then press the pound button. Press pound again when prompted for participant ID. Once admitted to the meeting, press *9 to request to speak. If I can have you all mute your phones or devices, that would be really helpful. Thank you so much. With that, Mr. Clerk, if you can please call the roll.
Certainly, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Joe Buscaino.
Here.
Councilmember Mike Bonin.
Here.
Councilmember Paul Krikorian.
Here.
Everyone's present. You have a quorum, sir.
Thank you, sir. So with that, let's take public comment. With that, I'd like to turn to Dennis, if you can identify speakers on the queue. I believe he's just identified them by the last.
Mr. Chair, we have 4 callers waiting. First caller with the phone number ending in 7637. Please state the items you would like to speak on.
Thank you very much. Good morning, good afternoon. Thank you very much. My name is Shimatis Patas Miguel. I am from the Tax Workers Association of Los Angeles. I would like to bring attention to the motion that has been waiting in your committee for a long time. The taxi drivers would like to go back to pick up customers from the curbside at LAX. That motion has been there for a long time. We're expecting it to move to the full committee and be voted on. We, the drivers, are devastated ever since we have been removed from the taxi pickup from the central area. Definitely, the city of Los Angeles has a living wage that had been put in the rule. Since we have been removed from picking up at the curbside, we have been losing income, and we have been thrown to compete with the unruly TNCs that are subsidized by companies.
Thank you, caller. Your time has expired. Next caller, phone number ending in 1736. Please state your name and the items you would like to speak on. Phone number ending in 1736. Please state your name and the items you would like to speak on. Okay, next caller, phone number ending in 7660. Please state your name and the items you would like. Hello? Can you hear me? Hello?
Go ahead. Go ahead, caller.
7660. Please state your name and the items you would like to speak on.
My name is Leon Slonovic. I'm the president of Taxi Workers Association of Los Angeles. I'd like to make a general public comment and to speak. And item number 2.
Go ahead. You have 2 minutes.
For each or for
2
each?
Minutes 2 minutes for both items total. Go ahead.
Okay. We have proven that that taxi cabs are not an impediment to traffic at LAX. We've also proven that the Lava's argument that we take the disproportionate amount of space because they're only considering 1/4 of the available curb space. Cabs will not and have not interfered in the construction, especially considering what most, if not all of it, is either at the center of the airport or on upper level. The argument we have disproven is that the taxis will interfere with the inner lane traffic. The bottom line is the city is now suing. We're disproving all of this, and this is a public policy issue that needs to be addressed immediately. There's the Councilman Corris' motion has been languishing for about 8 months. Taxis can install petitions or shields to protect the public, and that would make them the most safe transportation at the airport and in the city. Considering the city is suing the Uber and Lyft, and they're threatening to withdraw, this may be the only private transportation options available to the public soon. It's an imperative that the committee addresses this issue before this affects the public and their safety. There's no expense and no issue the taxi industry has.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Caller ending in 1736. Please state your name and the item you would like to speak on.
This is John O'Bagdanian, item number 2.
Go ahead. You have 1 minute.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, John O'Bagdanian, General Manager, LA City Cab. Taxi cab companies have always served LAX under all types of conditions, especially now, and we believe we are safer than any other public or private transportation services for the LAX passengers. The CDC guidelines focuses on risk management. Risk is managed with barriers and distance. Buses such as LAX shuttles still are problematic for the risk of bringing passengers together in close proximity. Taxi stands that we had proposed to LAVA and to this committee are still available, have not been impacted by the construction as originally projected. At today's trip volume, it's not worth the risk. We shouldn't force few passengers to board the bus. The taxi industry does and will follow all the required cleaning procedures before and after a passenger uses a taxi cab. Please move us back to the CTA where we can more safely serve the LAX passengers. We are more than happy to work with the LAVA staff to implement a plan immediately. Thank you for the opportunity to make these comments.
Okay, and our final caller, phone number ending in 4617. Please state your name and the item you would like to speak on.
Yes, this is Gary Vogan. I'm the Secretary of the Taxi Workers Association of Los Angeles, and I want to speak to the Corris motion on the restoration of taxi cab stands inside the CTA.
Go ahead, Gary, you have 1 minute.
Gentlemen, quite a few things have happened since the Corris motion was introduced to restore our taxi cab stands. According to the LAWA statistics, in May of 2019, there were over 3 million trips inside the CTA area. As of May 2020, according to the latest statistics I saw, there are less than 600,000 trips now, going through the CTA area. In May of 2019, there were 120,000 taxi cab trips through the CTA. This May of 2020, there are less than 5,000. Gentlemen, 170,000 people have died from the pandemic. 5,273 of them have died here in LA County. The airline business and traffic is not coming back anytime soon. the pandemic is out of control, and the purpose of the TNC, the transport buses, the reason for it is over. The traffic is not coming back, and it's cruelty, and it's just absurd adherence to the rules to keep, the holding lot outside of LAX. You need to go back into.
Thank you. Your time has expired. Mr. Chair, there are no more speakers.
Thank you, Dennis. Colleagues, and I'd like to thank all the callers who called in to T3 this afternoon. Appreciate your comments. With that, members, I'd like to turn your attention to today's agenda, and I'd like to request we take items 4 through 12 on consent. Any member would like to hold any of those items on the desk? Okay, seeing none. If we can take a roll call vote on items 4 through 12.
Yes, certainly, Mr. Chair. Councilmember Joe Buscaino.
Yes.
Councilmember Mike Bonin.
Yes.
Councilmember Paul Horian.
Aye.
3 ayes, sir. Approval passes.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. Thank you, Mr. Clerk and members. With that, we have 3 of our general managers, of course, from the Port of Los Angeles, LA World Airports, and our Don Liu, who represents our tourism department. These are members. These are 3 critical industries that really impact our job sectors, not here locally but regionally. And I wanted to get an opportunity to get a status of the department activities. We normally have them come in every quarter, but in light of what's taken shape with the pandemic, we've seen significant hits to our economies in dealing with how we move goods. Of course, passengers coming into the airport and how airlines are being impacted by COVID-19. Of course, the significant impacts of our tourism industry. So we'll start with Mr. Soroka, be followed by then Mr. Abachi, and then Mr. Liu. So let's take item number 1. If you can read that into the record, Mr. Clerk.
Yes, sir. Item number 1 is an item continued from September 3, 2019. It's an Executive Director, Port of Los Angeles, to report relative to the status of department activities, including operations, finances, capital improvement projects, public safety and security, planning, technology, and marketing promotions, pursuant to motion Buscaino and Bonin, including an update on the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic and the department's response thereto.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. So, Mr. Soroka, I'd like to turn it over to you. Members, he's got a presentation for us, and then we'll turn it over to questions. Gene, the floor is yours.
Great. Thank you, Chairman and committee members. I'm Gene Soroka, the Executive Director at the Port of Los Angeles and concurrently the city's Chief Logistics Officer. I have some updates starting with our business at the Port of Los Angeles. Today, through the month of July, our shipping business is down a little more than 15% on the heels of trade tensions between the United States and China and the virtual shuttering of the U.S. economy due to COVID-19. In the most recent month, though, there were some signs of improvement. In July, we moved more than 856,000 container units, which was our best month of the year in 2020, our second best July ever, which is usually a precursor leading into our traditional peak season, and overall, our 7th best month ever. Mainly, we see replenishing our omni-channel distribution network, our warehouses, distribution centers, etc., showing this uptick. And according to our demand signals, the months of August and September also look to be encouraging, leading up to China's traditional national holiday week, the first week of October. Most folks look at this as one port complex, and therefore to share with you, in addition to our neighboring port, cargo volume is down 10% year to date through July and showing a modest 5% uptick for the month. This also has a direct impact on the jobs in and around our harbor community. And for week 33, we watch these labor counts very closely. The shift count ending August 7th for longshore labor on our docks was a little more than 44,000 shifts. That was up 5% versus the prior week, and it was the highest single week of employment for the year, and the fourth consecutive week over 40,000 shifts. Year-to-date comparison, down 16%, so almost in line with the cargo declines, where what we don't see right now is labor work outstripping those declines in shipping. That's very important. Secondly, we're up 3% on labor shift counts versus the all-important 3.5-year average, which takes out some of the shocks to the supply chain, including those tariff milestones that have been implemented and the severe downturn due to COVID-19. With all of this going on, we have not taken our eye off the ball, as exemplified by the world record-setting call of the Mediterranean shipping company Isabella. And at the conclusion of her work on June 18th of this summertime, we moved on and off that vessel more than 18,400 container units, which was nearly 1,400 more than the previous world record. So that includes about 34,000 TEUs that were loaded and discharged from this vessel in one vessel call. On the health and safety front, as you all know very well, the longshore work here at the ports of Los Angeles and our neighboring port in San Pedro Bay are governed by a collective bargaining agreement between the union and the PMA. The leadership of both of those organizations meet on a regular basis, and here at the local level, multiple conversations per day. Health and safety in this COVID environment has been job number one for both the employers as well as the union leadership and members. To date, the Pacific Maritime Association, the employers group, is spending more than $1 million a week up and down the West Coast across 29 ports for sanitizing equipment and telecommunications devices, adding extra labor, buying extra supplies to make sure that equipment handoffs exceed the Centers for Disease Control and the Los Angeles County Health Service requirements. The Port of Los Angeles has also chipped in thanks to the great work of the LA Department of Water and Power in supplying cleaning solution to all of our terminals across San Pedro Bay, industrial-grade personal protective equipment, and COVID testing, most recently on the 16th of July at the dispatch hall for ILWU in Wilmington. And there'll be more work by the Port of Los Angeles in all of these areas as we continue to support our longshore labor, truckers, and many others who have jobs related to this port in addition to the Employers Association. On our side of community investment, thanks to our strong financial policy, with special appreciation to Mayor Eric Garcetti, this Los Angeles City Council, our Board of Harbor Commissioners, and our CFO, Marla Blevins, we have been able to continue our investment through cycle. More than $367 million of capital improvement projects continue, which equate to approximately 3,000 construction jobs on an annual basis. The goal here is to continue to move through all of our construction on infrastructure to drive visitor serving and cargo post-COVID-19. Our Los Angeles Logistics Victory Los Angeles initiative is now comprised of more than 24 volunteers, mainly Harbor Department employees. And we just recently crossed 1 million units of personal protective equipment that have been provided to more than 30 hospitals in the Los Angeles area. Just last week, we announced an MOU with the California Manufacturing and Technology Association to help drive PPE and help our California manufacturers get back up and start moving to help our California economy reemerge. We continue with Love LA to build a working stockpile of PPE, including N95 masks, isolation gowns, and medical exam gloves that are all needed by our frontline workers and hospitals. Downline, our current year shipping projections show a decline of 15% year on year, which will rival the declines we witnessed during the Great Recession. Jobs, as I've stated, are being impacted. And with 55 million Americans out of work today, we believe we have a small role to play in helping some of those folks get back on the job. With our focus on exports, and in fact, the U.S. Department of Labor states that export jobs pay 17% more than jobs in other segments, we believe there is a real opportunity here in the agricultural, manufacturing, and automotive sectors, to be specific. We'll continue to chase every import shipment we can, but we also recognize that the combination of both may make us a more attractive trade gateway, and understanding that more cargo will equal more jobs here at America's port. We're also continuing to accelerate our environmental work, as exemplified by our original equipment manufacturer truck summit and workshops, to help pull together policy and legislation, financing and infrastructure needs, while pairing up manufacturers of new technologically designed equipment, working our way towards zero emissions with those customers that need to purchase this equipment and make it movable here at our port and in and around our harbor complex. And this concludes my remarks for this afternoon. Happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Soroka. Just to kick off, let me first thank you for stepping up and taking on that Chief Logistics Officer role, Gene. You've just been phenomenal and under the direction of Mayor Garcetti. Aside from your responsibilities of moving our goods and being a good neighbor at the Port of Los Angeles, you've taken on this added responsibility. So just on behalf of the entire city, we're grateful and thank you for taking on this role.
Thank you.
Looking at, federal or state support, and something I'm going to ask the other two general managers, have we received any federal state support to address the impacts of COVID-19? And how do you anticipate any additional release funding if it comes our way? We know that all three industries, the economy will struggle, and by the time we getting back to employment will be quite sluggish, which is alarming for our region and for our state. But if you can just touch on that, on how our federal state partners have come to any aid at the Harbor Department.
Yeah, the look at the federal legislation during this difficult time has been first and foremost on our minds and the work we've attempted to do in both Washington and Sacramento. And while no direct aid has been put forward to the ports individually, there has been work done to assist us in our port community. The Paycheck Guarantee Program has assisted many of our restaurants, retail, and dining establishments here in the harbor area. The work that we're doing from the initiation of discussion on the CARES Act assisted us with the Harbor Maintenance Trust in one of three key areas that we have been pushing for legislation on during the time that I've been here. And in the next wave of discussions in Washington, we're looking at specific monies to go towards longshore labor, the Employers Association, and the assistance with that sanitization and cleaning of equipment to make sure that during labor shift work, we have the ability to pass off the cleanest and most sanitized equipment.
Appreciate that. And that was another question I had on the safety measures that have been implemented. Happy to hear it's important to keep our workers at the port safe, to prevent the spread of COVID-19. They are on the ground. They are a driving force to our economy. And lastly, and then I'll turn to my colleagues, as far as the impacts of the federal tariffs, have there been any impacts of the federal tariffs having on cargo traffic through the port?
Yes, two key points. We will lose 15% of our imports permanently, and that's on top of the 20% market share decline we've witnessed since 2002 here at the Port of Los Angeles. Second is, out of the 15% drop we will see year on year, just in round numbers, 10 percentage points are because of the declining demand in the U.S. due to COVID-19 and all of us staying at home for the most part, not going out shopping to restaurants or to ball games. The other 5 percentage points are due to that permanent effect of the tariffs on China, and more importantly to us, the retaliatory tariffs that have been placed by China on American companies. Our exports through the Port of Los Angeles have been down 20 out of the last 21 months. And to get back to any sense of having folks go back on the job, get to work, and help our American companies reconnect with their overseas customers, I believe it must start with the export community, and who better to help than the city and port of Los Angeles.
Thanks for that, Gene. And then one alarming concern I have was I appreciate you focusing on one of your slides on the community investments, and thank you for moving on the infrastructure. I know there's a key item on Thursday's agenda on moving forward on the Wilmington Waterfront project. With the slowdown of the port traffic, how is that going to impact these community investments?
Zero. We've made a commitment to you, our community, and so many others that we'll keep pushing. And we tied that community investment to our operating income. And while that will move up and down, what we have seen thus far is that we've built up a bank account. Our commitments are as solid as ever, and it's because of that strong financial policy we're able to continue to invest through cycle. So we'll keep this, as always, our highest priority. And again, that the score I had in that last slide was that hopefully we can use this time, like so many of you have worked closely within the city, to get ahead on projects while we can. And the plan being that when we do come out the other side of COVID-19, we here at the Port of Los Angeles will be ready for our visitor serving growth on that business, as well as our cargo growth on the industrial side. So we're charging full speed ahead.
Fantastic. Including our San Pedro public market. One update on the public market. There's always rumors around town. Is it going to happen? Is it not going to happen now with COVID? Quick update on that.
Oh, it's going to happen. And we continue with the building of our promenade, the connection to Town Square. The work, obviously, in the retail and dining community has slowed somewhat because most of us and our families simply aren't going out to the restaurants. But that is obviously a landmark project for us and a signature project for the city. So we'll keep moving ahead. Again, these are bumps in the road that no one can control, but we'll keep up very quietly in front and behind the scenes with our development aspects that have been committed to this community for some time. So when the marketplace comes back, we will be more than ready and forward-leaning.
Thank you, Gene. Members, questions, comments for Mr. Soroka? Okay. Hearing none. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Your update, and please give the best to your executive team, members of the port team, as well as our longshore workforce, and of course our terminal operators, PMA. I'm really proud of how they've handled this pandemic moving forward. So thank you again.
Thank you, Chairman, and to this committee and the full City Council for your ongoing support. Thank you.
Thanks again. Okay, members, what we'll do is, since we get periodic updates from the general manager for each of the three departments, will continue this item. And with that, we'll take now item number 2. If you can read item number 2 in the record, please.
Certainly, sir. Item number 2 is an item continued from March 19, 2019. It's Chief Executive Officer of the Los Angeles World Airports to report relative to the status of department operations, finances, capital improvement projects, public safety and security, planning, technology, marketing and promotions, and other activities pursuant to Motion Buscaino and Bonin, including an update on the impacts of COVID-19 pandemic and the department's response thereto.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. With that, Mr. Arbachi is here. Thank you so much for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, council members. Thank you for the opportunity to provide you with an update on what's happening at our airports. I think, can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. I wasn't sure, I can't see it. So today I want to emphasize the impacts that we are realizing here at our airports based upon the unprecedented COVID-19 pandemic. It's pretty much consumed us, and so it's appropriate, I believe, that the focus is on that area. So let me start on there. I can't see the presentation, so I apologize for that. So I don't know which slide I'm on right now. Hold on a second. Let me see if I can figure that out.
IT is there a way to split his screen?
I'm sorry?
Just asking IT if there's any way.
You're on your initial slide that says LAWA, LAX, and Van Nuys.
Okay, so let me move down on that. I don't know how I can here. Something is not working right here. I apologize for that. Are we now on the passenger traffic slide?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So now I know where I am. Sorry about that. So obviously the impacts on our passenger traffic are significant. We were down as much as 95% in April and May, and for most of April and May, we hovered around between 95 and 90% down in traffic. We then started in June to make an upward growth pattern, and we peaked around the July 4th weekend when we got up to about 80% down, so between 75 and 80% down. Right about that time is when we saw the resurgence of cases happening here in Los Angeles area and throughout the country. And that's when also some of the other states started putting in place restrictions on travel and quarantine periods. And so we then stopped that growth and we started to level off. And as you can see, between July 4th weekend and now we're hovering between, somewhere around that 80% marker, in between 75, 80% down. So we were hoping that we were going to see an increase based upon this growth pattern up until July, but the airlines also were quite optimistic and they started adding a lot of flights to their schedule. But unfortunately, when we saw this resurgence across the country, that tapered off, as did demand. And so the airlines started for the months of August, September, and October have started to pare down their previously somewhat ambitious schedules. So we see that until we see some kind of a change or an improvement in the cases across the country, we will probably stagger within this for a couple of more months at least, between 75, 80%. We will have hopefully surges where we get above that, but we're not anticipating huge surges above that for the next couple of months. What's going to happen beyond then is very, for anyone to guess. The airlines have pretty much taken all of their forecasting tools that they've previously used and thrown them in the bin. It is an unprecedented situation, and they're looking at this market on a week-by-week basis. Just to give you an overview of this next slide, you can see for July, we had 1.5 million departing passengers when we normally have 8.4 million. And so you can see that that's a July reduction of approximately 82%. The cargo situation actually is better. We actually have seen an uptick in cargo. In July, our cargo numbers were up 10% from the previous year. What we're seeing is many, especially international carriers, are actually loading their passenger airplanes with cargo. So we do see a good sign from the cargo perspective, but obviously not enough to make up for the huge loss in passengers. And much of the income we realize depends on passengers and not on cargo. So to address this, back in May, early May, we initiated a COVID-19 recovery task force with 7 various streams to look at all aspects of the business and help us to put things in place so that we can be ready to come out of this and to help us to come out of this. So I'm going to go through some of the streams of this recovery task force and talk about that. First one was all about how do we bring our employees back to work. So since the beginning of March, we had most of one third of our workforce telecommuting. Pretty much those that were able to telecommute are telecommuting still. Obviously, we have a large group of people who need to be here at the airport to run the operations here, but we still have 1,100 people telecommuting. So, from the very beginning, our emphasis was on how we keep our employees, as well as our passengers, safe and healthy. And we will continue to do that as we determine how we will go about bringing them back to work. We, like the rest of the city, are not having our employees back yet, and we don't foresee within the next couple of months bringing them back. We are nonetheless planning on what that will look like when they do come back. So we have in place a screening app for employees so that they take their temperatures and register them before they come in. We're doing pilots not only in our terminals, which I'll talk about later, but also for our office buildings, temperature screenings for passengers when they come back. We've been working to plan space around how we can make sure that when we do bring people back that they're appropriately physically distanced. And we, obviously are putting in plexiglass and other types of barriers where we need to. And we've been working with the fire department. The LAFD has been really gracious in working with us to provide COVID tests to many of our employees. And we're looking at other options for us to be able to continue to provide COVID testing for our employees. A lot of work around that. But much of our work has been focused on how do we bring passengers back to the airport, and how do we make them feel comfortable to want to travel again. And we've been doing many, many things and putting in multiple layers of protection to make sure that our passengers and all of the employees in the terminals are healthy and safe, and that our terminal facilities are clean. So many of the things we're doing, we're trying to provide as much touchless capability as possible so people don't have to touch things and interact. We'll be expanding our Shop and Dine application, which will allow passengers or employees to be able to order food through their mobile device and then just go and pick it up. So there doesn't need to be any type of transaction taking place, no touching transaction. We have virtual assistance desks that we're piloting, whereby people can have a live video chat with an airport worker, so that they can get the information they need at the terminal, but without having to have a face-to-face encounter. It keeps both the passenger and our employees safe. We're implementing touchless faucets, drinking fountains, using facial recognition and biometrics where possible. So a lot of emphasis on the whole touchless experience. And we've been, since the very beginning of this pandemic, been taking, really, really enhanced steps to keep our terminals clean and healthy. We've been, really emphasizing how we clean our high-touch areas, using different types of cleaning equipment, electrospray units now. We're testing different types of UV technology for lights in the bathroom so that they can also sterilize as well as provide illumination. We have special tests of using ultraviolet light to sanitize escalator handrails, and we're using ultraviolet and ionization to filter the air. So a lot of emphasis on how we keep things clean. And of course, we have all types of policies in place and are helping our passengers and guests to understand how to follow those policies. So we're the first airport, one of the first airports in the country to require face coverings for anybody who comes in the terminals. We've deployed travel safely ambassadors in the airports to help passengers get information, but also to provide masks or other types of information about how they can maintain safe physical distancing and other health parameters while they're in our terminals. We've installed more than 100 plexiglass barriers, and we also have installed vending machines that provide all types of protective equipment, including facial coverings, gloves, hand sanitizers, and other sanitary goods. And then, of course, we have all kinds of signage and messages in the airport to help people to understand how to comply and keep themselves safe while they're in our terminals. But we're also trying to use innovative technologies as well to try to provide as many layers of protection as we can. So we were the first airport in the country to conduct a temperature check pilot with using infrared technology to take people's temperatures as they walk into the Tom Bradley International Terminal. So we were testing 3 different types of cameras here and different types of processes around doing that. That pilot is continuing through the end of this month, and we hope to be able to take the learnings and deploy further and use those learnings to help push this type of a solution throughout the industry so that we can have a consistent approach across the country. We also have actually, it's been so successful that we've worked with Delta to also deploy this this pilot in Terminal 2 as well, so we've expanded them. We're also working with our international colleagues at 9 major airports, hub airports across the globe, to put in place, we're calling them air bridges, to allow us to try to stimulate international traffic. So these air bridges include standards of sanitation and policies and processes that can be followed by all of these airports so that people are comfortable that when they travel between these airports, they're going to get the highest level of health and safety. But also we're looking, we have developed a framework and we're trying to speak about this framework with as many government agencies as possible, whereby we would provide the capability for passengers to get a COVID test before they leave or upon arrival, so as to be able to avoid some of the restrictions that are in place or to avoid or shorten any type of quarantine that is being required by any country. So we hope that by providing this, we can allow the opportunity for us to overcome some of the restrictions in place and stimulate the pent-up demand in international travel that we believe is out there. We've also worked with the LA County Health, with CDC, with AAAE, which is our industry body, and with local Cedars-Sinai and UCLA Health to create this infectious disease assessment tool. We've customized it for the airport. They've come in and they've done 2 rounds of this assessment thus far, and we're waiting for the final report to come in. And we've set this up such that it can be reused by other airports throughout the country for that purpose. So a lot of activity going around to help keep passengers healthy and safe and encourage them and feel comfortable to come back to the airport and fly again. And I should say the airlines are stepping up to the plate as well. And you've heard many of the things that they're doing, including requiring facial coverings in the airplanes while they travel, and they're getting quite strict about that. Also, the cleaning of the airplanes is quite significant. So air travel has never been safer from that perspective. The airports have never been cleaner. The aircraft have never been cleaner. And people are wearing facial coverings throughout the entire journey. I want to move on then to talk about some of the construction that is going on in at the airports. So we have continued with all of those construction projects that are key to our capital improvement program, and all those that we had already begun and were out of the ground. That includes all of the landside access modernization program projects, which is our people mover train, our consolidated rental car facility, our intermodal transportation facility. You can see on the picture here to the right, this is what the East Station looks like right now. So you can see where all that wood is showing. That's where the actual guideway for the train is going to rest, and that will be the area where the passengers get on and off the train. We're also continuing with the Midfield Satellite Concourse and are hoping to open that facility in the first quarter of next year. All of our terminal modernization projects are continuing. Our airport police facility is well underway, and I think we've topped off the last deck on that facility recently. And we still have our taxiway improvements going on. So all of those key infrastructure projects are continuing to provide jobs for people and continue to help us to develop the infrastructure improvements we need for the future of the airport and for the city. Regarding our airfield and terminal modernization project, this is the environmental study that we had going on regarding adding Terminal 9, C0, and Concourse 0 and some of our taxiway improvements. We have continued with the environmental process of that project. We have not done any work as far as the actual construction of those or design of those buildings, but we are going forward with the environmental. We hope to be filing those first EIR documents in the end of this quarter, and then we will hope to get a final determination on that by the second half of next year. At that point, we hope to be far enough where we can determine how we're moving forward with those projects. And we've also been able to take advantage of some of the reduced traffic that we have in the CTA, both from a passenger and a vehicle perspective, and we've been able to accelerate some of the projects we have. So for the People Mover Train project, we were able to give them more of a shutdown of certain roadways, including Center Way and blocking off some of the roads in the CTA to allow them to speed up some of the construction that they are doing and allow them to work multiple shifts instead of just a night shift. We also shut down Terminal 3 to consolidate some of the traffic there, and we are going to keep Terminal 3 closed now and just do the reconstruction project of that terminal much faster and hope to be finished almost a year earlier than originally scheduled. Then obviously the financial impact of this pandemic is significant on us. We depend heavily on the revenue generated by passengers. So we depend on all of the ancillary revenues that come from parking, from the concessions, food and beverage, retail, from our rental car facilities, the TNC traffic. So we depend heavily on that traffic, and obviously when we have a significant reduction in number of passengers, we are losing out a significant amount of that revenue, most proportionally. So it's setting up.
If you can, on that slide, sorry to interrupt. This is an important slide. It's hard to read. When would you start projecting an increase in passenger traffic? The numbers are just tiny.
Yes, I'm sorry for that. So basically what this shows is that we don't see the traffic returning in a quick V-shaped recovery. It's a much more prolonged U-shaped recovery. And this shows through the end of our fiscal year, which ends in June of next year, 2021. Okay. And so that curve basically shows us coming up to a point where for the entire year, we're forecasting that we will be at a level 65% lower than we were in 2019. So that's what we've based our entire forecast on. It's conservative, but not too conservative as it turns out. We were right in assuming that it wasn't going to be a V-shaped recovery, and that's going to be much more gradual and elongated. So that's the forecast that we are using for setting up all of our budget parameters. And then as a result of the significant loss in revenue, and we're estimating that we will lose about $308 million in revenue as compared to last year. It would be a lot worse, except that we get a lot of revenue from rents. And assuming that the people are going to pay the rents, we will still have a deficit of over $308 million. So to help us address that, we've taken significant financial and fiscal measures. We implemented a separation incentive program for those people who were eligible to retire. We did this very early on, and we have 330 employees retiring under that program, and they will almost all be retired at the end of October, so the savings will be quite significant for us there. And we've implemented hiring freezes, and through attrition, we were able we'll be operating with 15% fewer employees than we were. It's still not enough, so we are still looking and need to get additional personnel cost reductions, and are working with the various entities to try to achieve those. We also had all of our departments reduce their operational budgets by at least 20%, some of them a lot higher than that. And we've done a significant amount of work to reduce consulting services, and planning using our employees to do a lot more in the short period, so we can reduce our dependency on consulting, and we're significantly reducing overtime restrictions. So we've done a lot to really cut our budget and allow us to be able to continue to run a good operation and provide healthy and clean and safe facilities and services, but also to continue to do our capital improvement program. At the same time, we're taking advantage of this opportunity to be able to revisit and reimagine how we work as an organization. It's an unprecedented time, and so a lot of the things that we need to put in place to to recover require us to be innovative and to rethink the way we do things. So we have a special stream in our recovery task force that's dedicated to determining how we can improve our operations through this period, and how we can do more with less. So there are many things that we're doing in that area. Here's just a few. So enterprise procurement, we're going to be consolidating enterprise procurement, centralizing a lot of administrative functions, consolidating divisions, and just having everybody rethink about how we run our airport. So we're looking for some really good results from that area. So those are main topics. I can go on a lot more, but I think that covers it.
Thank you, Mr. Arbachi. Appreciate you. I had a number of questions that you already answered in your presentation. I want to know what safety measures have been implemented for visitors and employees. Have you seen an uptick in air travel, and how has COVID-19 pandemic impacted ongoing capital projects? You've answered all of them. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bonin.
Thank you very much, Mr. Buscaino. Thank you, Mr. Arbachi, for a characteristically great and thorough presentation. Very appreciative. Want to acknowledge that I really think that you and your team in LAWA have really been leading the way, trying to pioneer how an airport functions in this new and constantly changing reality. And I think other airports are going to be modeling the kind of things you're trying to do, and so I want to acknowledge that and just say how much I appreciated it. I really like the focus in the PowerPoint on safety for travelers, and I appreciated the focus as well on the safety for LAWA employees. But as you know, I always think about LAX as a city. I mean, it's not really an airport. It is a city, its own business sector, its own labor sector, its own neighborhoods, its own police force, the whole deal. It's an entity in and of itself. And so I'm curious not just about the LAWA employees, but what's being done to protect the employees who are handling the luggage, or who are cleaning the bathroom, or are preparing the food, or emptying the trash. I understand you sent me a detailed letter the other day that I haven't had a chance to review yet. If you could just sort of give me a high level about what's being done to take care of not just the people who pay to come through the airport, but the people who are paid, or, well, in many cases, underpaid to work at the airport, in our concessions, in our custodial positions, all of those.
Right. So all of the measures that we're taking are addressed or are set up to address all of the people who work here. So, and all the people who come through the airport. So that would include all of the employees as well. Now, obviously, there are some employees that don't work in our facilities here at the airport. They work off the airport. But for anybody who's here in our facilities, in the public or LAWA facilities, we are gearing all of the protections towards them. So all of the policies, all of the cleanliness we're doing, we're
COVID testing, screening app applies to them as well.
So we will make when we put I didn't mention, but we are looking to pilot putting an actual COVID testing facility here on the airport for employees of any airport employee, as well as for passengers, as part of our air bridge concept. We need to have the ability for passengers to take a test before they leave or upon arrival. But that same facility will be used, we hope, for all of the employees at the airport. So that's something we're providing. We also are working with, we have stepped up. The letter that we sent you is basically a response to how we want to improve the way we're monitoring, the way that airline or other partner contractors that we don't control, how we are monitoring and making sure that they are providing proper training to their employees, including in those areas around disease spread and pandemic type of situations. So we've given you some some suggestions on how we plan to improve that process as well. But that's the major part of what we're doing in that area.
All right, I'll look forward to reviewing the letter and following up with you more. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bonin. Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Abachi, for that report. First, I want to build a little bit on Mr. Bonin's question about safety, because now that people are starting to fly again, of course, significant concern for a lot of people in Los Angeles is who's coming into the airport and how are we ensuring that folks who are coming in are not contributing further to the pandemic exposure that people have here. So I wasn't quite clear in your presentation whether the AirBridge program is intended to address that. How are arriving passengers screened, if at all, and are there practical steps that can be taken to be able to do that? What have you learned in looking at that issue?
So thank you for the question. First, the very same protections that were established very early on in this pandemic are still in place for international arrivals. We still have international restrictions on non-U.S. citizens coming from Europe, from China, from Iran, and from Brazil. So they are still there's still a restriction. So those people can't even fly into the United States. And for those passengers, those U.S. citizens who do come in from those areas, they are still being screened by CDC upon arrival, just as they were when the pandemic first started. So those are in place. The AirBridge concept. If everybody does that nationwide, then you can ensure that the people who are arriving were already screened, if you will, at their point of origination.
Now, by the nature of their functions, airports are places where people crowd together in tight spaces around baggage claim and in skyways and so forth. So how are you ensuring some degree of safe distancing in those pinch point areas?
It's a great question. It's the most difficult task that we have as an airport, any airport, is to maintain physical distancing of people when they're in the airport. As you say, normally the airports are not built to allow for a nice 6 feet of space between passengers. It's much easier now that our numbers are down, so it's not as big of a challenge now. But nonetheless, what we've done is we have done lots of things to try to foster physical distancing. We make sure we have lots of signs around when we have floor markings where people normally would queue up, either markings on the floor or on the stanchions as they're queuing up. And we, again, put signage wherever we can to try to show people how to maintain a physical distance. We work with the airlines, with TSA, with CBP to try to work with them to promote that physical distancing. And we're again, trying to get the message out that people need to be responsible as well for keeping the physical distancing. But that's why it's really, really critical for us to have the facial covering requirement in the airport, because there are going to be instances where it's not going to be so easy to maintain that 6 feet of physical distancing. So we need to make sure that everybody's wearing a facial covering so that they are protecting each other.
Thank you. Now, I don't know if there's any way that you can gather this data, but given the fact that we're at around 30% of normal passenger load through the airport, do you have a sense of who it is that's traveling? Whether these are tourists, business travelers, destinations, or where they're coming from. Do you have any kind of demographic sense of who's traveling now?
We do, in talking with our airline partners and with others, and getting different industry data. Everybody agrees that it's predominantly leisure travelers that are in the market right now. The business travel is still very low. We know with all the telecommuting that's been working that the business people aren't out there yet. There's a lot of pent-up demand, but the people just still aren't flying as much. So it's predominantly leisure right now. And I should also state that the most of the traffic that we have is domestic. I think you saw in those statistics that domestic traffic is only down about 75%, but international traffic is down still around 90%. So most of the travel is domestic and leisure.
Okay, thank you. An important component of your cost reduction strategy has been the separation and incentive program. Now that you have launched that, can you share some thoughts about operational impacts, whether you think it was an effective strategy or not an effective strategy? What might you have done differently if you had to do it over again?
Well, they're not. We actually haven't. This will be the first month where we have a large number of people retiring. So we haven't actually lived the separation. We will over the next 3 months when people start leaving. I've been doing a lot of preparation for the transition of those people leaving, but also part of that is reorganizing how we operate so that we can learn how to continue with the operations with these fewer people. So I think that we're going to be well positioned to be able to continue to work despite the fact that we are losing a lot of not only people, but people who have been around for a long time and have a lot of knowledge. So we've been working to make sure that knowledge is transferred, the tasks are transferred. We think we're well positioned. We'll obviously have to see how it goes, but we think it's the right approach towards helping us to reduce our personnel costs. As I said, we still need to try to do more. But yeah, I think it was the right approach right now.
Great. Finally, not a question, just a quick comment. As long as we have you here, and you heard some of the folks who called in on public comment to talk about getting cabs back into the central terminal area. This continues to be an important priority for me, as it is, I know, for Mr. Kretz, who made the motion. And given the significant decline in air passengers and traffic through the airport, and given the urgent need that so many people in this community have to pay their rent and to put food on the table, I'd really like to just reemphasize how important this is, I think, to so many families in Los Angeles to be able to move forward in some way in the interim period, at least, while traffic continues to be down, to move forward on this. But that's just a comment because it's not an agendized item, and we'll talk about it in depth, I suppose, when the motion is heard. But I did just want to put that on your radar as well.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Krikorian. One last question, and forgive me if you already hit up on this. You know, earlier in our consent item, the Port of Los Angeles, we approved the reduction of dockage fees for passenger vessels in response to COVID-19. And Mr. Abachi, can you just share with us efforts that have been made in putting forth the same incentives for airline companies? And I know we as a council approved some rent relief, but are you looking at offering reduced landing fees for airline companies?
Yes, we're looking at a myriad of options for figuring out how we can help our partners make it through this period. You mentioned the relief programs that we already had in place for the airlines and allowing them to defer some of their rents and fees. The concessionaires, we've changed them from for a period of having to percent rent instead of the minimum annual guarantees, and we're looking to expand on that relief program. We also I forgot to mention that we did receive CARES Act money from the federal government in the amount of $323 million, and we are using portions of that to recover from some of the revenue that we're not getting because of the decline in passengers, but we're also using some to help maintain the rates and charges that we're imposing on our airlines. Without that, their rates and charges, because they're based upon usage, would increase significantly. So we're trying to use some of the CARES Act money to help offset some of those impacts.
Good to know. Thank you so much for that report. Thank you, members, for your questions. With that, we'll continue item number 2, as we'd like to have Mr. Abachi come before us again next quarter to get an update. So thank you again, Mr. Abachi, for your report.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's turn to item number 3. Mr. Clerk, can you read item 3 into the record, please?
Certainly, sir. Item number 3 is an item continued from February 19, 2019. It's an Executive Director, Department of Convention and Tourism Development, to report relative to the status of department activities, operations, finances, capital improvement projects, public safety and security, planning, technology, marketing and promotions, and related matters pursuant to Motion Buscaino and Bonin, including an update on the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic and the department's response thereto.
Thank you so much, Mr. Clerk. So with us before us, we have Mr. Don Liu, General Manager of Department of Convention, Tourism and Development. Thank you, Don, for joining us. Boy, we just miss seeing an active convention center. And I know this industry is taking a significant hit as it relates to tourism, and our hotels are minimal capacity at that. And we know we heavily rely on TOT, and that in itself, as Mr. Krikorian can attest to, is taking a significant hit on our budget. So with that, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, council members. You're absolutely right. Tourism and conventions both have taken a significant hit. And as we look at the phased recovery of our economy, it looks like tourism and gatherings will be the last to recover. Let's go to the first slide. Let me talk about the overall impact on tourism to begin with. A significant loss in economic benefits from the pandemic crisis. 20 million visitors is estimated to be the reduction from a high of 51.2 million in 2019. We're expecting about a little over 30 million this next year. that was about 30 million room nights pre-pandemic. We expect that to drop under 20 million. So another loss of about 11 million room nights from our hotels. That many visitors spend about 25 million pre-pandemic. We're expecting to lose about $10 billion in economic impact here in the LA region, and significant to LA and LA's general fund. We were contributing $345 million to the general fund in TOT, and we expect that to drop to about 197 million, a loss of about 150. That's a big hit. Could probably fund several departments on its own, if you look at it that way. A big loss to the general fund. Kim, next slide, please. And of course, it has a big impact on employment and our labor situation. Pre-pandemic, we were about 543,700 jobs in the leisure and hospitality sector here in LA County. We're expecting about a 45% drop in employment, down to 295,000. You know, we, like the port, we're one of every 9 jobs in the county of Los Angeles, but we've taken a bigger hit in the job losses. We're one out of every 3 jobs lost. These are great, high-paying, entry-level positions that support a diverse workforce in the city of LA, and they're being significantly hurt by this pandemic crisis. Next slide. Here's the lost revenue. I'm going to hone in on the convention center now and get a little more specific. But we've lost every citywide convention this year except the first 3. The last one we had was the LA Marathon check-in in March 6th, I think it was. But since then, we've had to cancel or reschedule every convention and expect to cancel or reschedule every convention for the remainder of this year and probably most of the first half of next year. That to date means that we've lost over 300,000 room nights due to these canceled or postponed conventions, about $400 million economic impact, $10 million in TOT, and significant to us since we rely on our convention center revenue to pay for our department expenses. We're not general funded. We expect to lose about $14.5 million in convention center revenue. Next slide, please. This is an illustration of the number of citywide conventions. These are the large conventions that require a minimum number of hotel room nights and have significant economic impact. We usually average between 25 and 30 citywide conventions each year. And as I said, here in 2020, in the middle of the chart there, you see that we've had 14 cancellations or postponements, leaving us only the first 3 of the year. Hoping that the 19 or so that are scheduled for the next year, that we can get some of those in. Next slide. We've taken some emergency measures, both at the Convention Center and at the Tourism Board. Here at the Convention Center, like I said, we've canceled all the events to comply with state and county orders. Our partners at AAG, who manage and operate the Convention Center, have reduced staff by 68%, laying off or furloughing about over 100 employees, and a 20% salary reduction for all the remaining staff. We did participate and help by hosting a medical relief center with 175 beds, originally 250 beds in the South Hall. Fortunately, we did not have the hospital surge that we were prepared for, and so we did not need to actually use our South Hall as a medical release center, but we did use it as a staging and housing center for the National Guard and for mutual aid law enforcement agencies during our protests that were here. I do need to credit AAG. They've been trying to be as creative as possible and find alternative uses for our facility. We were fortunate enough to reach a deal with Enterprise Rent-A-Car. As you can imagine, all those cars that are usually out on the road being rented were not. And Enterprise doesn't have a place to put all those cars. So we were the home for over 3,000 vehicles at the convention center for over 4 months. They're just starting to move them out now. And I think cars are being rented maybe a little bit more. We also work closely with our food and beverage vendor, Levy Foods, and they've been participating in the Senior Meal Emergency Response Program with our friends at Unite Here, Local 11, and their Hospitality Training Academy. They've been able to prepare over 8,000 meals a week for seniors. And the taxi cab folks that we heard from earlier in the meeting are participating in this by delivering those meals. So on almost every given day, you'll see a lineup of taxi cabs in our garage ready to pick up meals and deliver those to seniors. And we're proud to be participating in that kind of work. And lastly, we're working with Safe Parking LA to launch a program site in our Venice parking garage. Hopefully in October, they got funding from WASA, and we will be able to have a downtown located safe parking facility, hopefully in the next couple of months. Next slide. Mentioned the Convention Center emergency measures. I also want to give credit to our LA Tourism and Convention Board. Facing tough times, they've done what they can to cut costs and to put a Band-Aid on what's happening in their organization. They've halted all paid marketing campaigns. We used to spend probably over $20 million a year overseas in advertising. All of that advertising is halted. We've reduced global employment. We're one of the few tourism boards with actual employees, not contracts, but employees in foreign markets. And so significantly reduced those offices. There are 4 in China, 1 in Europe, just opened 1 in India. But those have all been significantly reduced. We're working with our citywide clients to assist them with their cancellations. So as you can imagine, the years that go into planning a convention here in LA, they needed some assistance. And sometimes it's just as simple as us canceling the venue rather than them canceling their event. Made it easier for them to work with their vendors and the hotels in the area. We have continued sales efforts. You know, the long lead time to book a convention is usually 5 to 10 years. So we still have a skeleton staff to help conventions that are still planning on coming to Los Angeles 5 and 10 years out. So we're actually doing virtual site inspections, and on the website, the LA Convention Center website, you can see a virtual reality tour of the convention center. We've been using that. We've also pivoted to work with Dine LA, which is a program that the tourism board started, and created a platform called Dine LA to Go to support the local restaurants and facilitate takeout and delivery. And they did some low-cost promotion of Los Angeles, including one called the Magic Hour that live streamed sunsets from the Hotel Irwin in Venice and gave people an opportunity to dream about someday returning to Los Angeles. Next slide, please. The recovery for tourists to Los Angeles are really going to look like these concentric circles. And as Justin talked about, the the overseas market is really going to be the last one to come back. And so these concentric circles represent the distance to Los Angeles, and we think it's going to also represent the order in which tourists come back to LA. So really the first kind of impact we'll see from tourists will be residents of Los Angeles, hopefully doing these staycations. The next phase will be the drive market, folks that can drive 2 or 3 hours, maybe a little bit longer, to our market, and hopefully spend some time at our attractions and museums and restaurants, and maybe even stay overnight. We then see that short haul market, 2 or 3 hour flights, anywhere along the West Coast, even including parts of Vancouver and Mexico. The long haul markets would be those folks from the Midwest and the East Coast, and they will come back a little bit long. It'll take a little bit longer for them to come back. And then lastly, the international markets. Given that we're focusing on the staycation campaign first, I'll be happy to show a public service announcement that was produced that all of the local television stations have thankfully agreed to air in a couple of weeks, starting in a couple of weeks. And next slide, Kim. The campaign is really Angelenos for Angelenos, kind of a motivating campaign. And it's basically if every Angeleno that's employed stays 3 nights in an LA hotel, dines at 3 restaurants, and participates in 3 museum visits or guided tours, it would inject $1.4 billion back into the LA economy and create more than 20,000 jobs. And so that's the campaign that we'll be rolling out in the next week or two, focusing really on Angelenos staying here and trying to get them not to go out of town for their vacations, but to plan staycations. So with any luck, we're going to try to show you a video, which is the PSA that will be airing on our local TV stations. And this will be a treat for us in Los Angeles because we usually never get to see the advertising that LA Tourism puts out.
Oh, that's incredible.
So you'll be able to see those on your TV screens starting in a couple of weeks.
Talk about a triple threat, huh?
And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Tone. Nicely done. Yeah, it's powerful. It's a powerful message. Just hope our residents do that. Thank you so much for your report. And thank you to you and your staff, along with AEG, for opening up your convention space in a time of crisis. And I know you guys went above and beyond the call of duty to use a convention space for things you typically don't use the space for. So really appreciate that, as indicated in your report. You've answered a couple of my questions already. I just want to ask, once, in my dealings with the National League of Cities, we had to cancel our city summit in Tampa later this year in November, and we'll be using a remote-based technology. Now, does the department expect demand for conventions and conferences to be permanently impacted as more industries are utilizing remote-based technologies?
Well, we hope that that's really a response to the interim until there's, therapeutic treatment or a vaccine. We really believe in our industry that there's this pent-up demand to see each other in person. And many of our clients, these organizations that are national and international, they only get together once a year. So many of them are used to these conference calls and video chats and things like that. But we're of the mind that once things are back to normal, things will be back to normal, and that these large organizations are still going to want to have their annual meetings, and that Los Angeles is a great place to hold those meetings. But in the meantime, you're absolutely right. We're gonna see, hopefully some conventions starting to come back next year, but they'll be much smaller than they used to, and they'll be what we're calling hybrid events. Instead of 10,000 people, maybe there'll be 1,000 people, but there might be 100,000 people online, and that's kind of what we're seeing.
And we heard from Mr. Arabachi on how COVID, the CARES Act has helped infuse some of these dollars into the airport. Are we seeing that in our tourism industry?
Unfortunately not. The way the CARES Act was written, the PPP program in particular, it was available to most organizations, including 501c3 nonprofits, but destination marketing organizations like LA Tourism are 501c6s, and so they were not eligible for the Paycheck Protection Program. It has been adjusted in the most recent version that hasn't been approved yet, but the last Senate version did include 501c6 as eligible. Also, venues that were municipal owned were not available for some of the CARES Act funding. And so the Convention Center Coalition in California has been working on trying to include venues. And nationally, U.S. Travel is working on ways to include venues like the Convention Center for some of the federal funding. But to date, no, we haven't gotten much. We're hoping to include the expenses that it took for our medical relief center to get some FEMA reimbursement. And we're working closely with the CAO on that.
Thanks again, Don. Thanks to you and your team as well, and the entire AG family. Tough times that I know we're going to get through this. I mean, you started your presentation with some June and gloom news, but I think we'll come out of this stronger and better. I'd like to turn over to Mr. Krikorian for any questions or comments.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Mr. Liu, for an excellent, if sobering, presentation. Thank you. The Chairman anticipated the question that I've asked probably for 6 years or 8 years now about changes in the convention industry. But it's really, I think it's really become that much more salient now just because the nature of business in this country is fundamentally transformed in the last 6 months. And I continue to be concerned that I agree with you that there will be pent-up demand for interaction and social engagement and so forth. But I think that with the familiarity and ease in which we're doing digital, virtual meetings, conferences, there will be permanent changes of some kind. And I think you mentioned, you referred to hybrid events that may be the events of the future, and I agree with that. There will be something, it'll be different. So how are you anticipating anticipating when you look forward to potential infrastructure changes in the convention center? How do you anticipate those changes when making plans for the very long haul that you need to make plans when you invest in infrastructure improvements? Are there things that we need to be thinking about that the convention center of 2030 will need that doesn't even exist now, or that we don't anticipate in conventions for the short haul?
Yeah, I mean, we think that, yes, the hybrid event may be with us for quite some time. We're fortunate that we have a theater complex in our current facility, we're working with our audiovisual vendors to create a studio there that will be available to our clients. So if they do have a hybrid event, they'll have some live attendees, but we'll be able to really pop up a full studio so that you can broadcast from the convention center to your online audience. I also think that our outdoor spaces are going to be more valuable. And so, if you've been to the auto show, E3, Anime, you've seen Gil Lindsay Plaza on Figueroa being used with tents and other activations. McDonald's once built a pool out there. I think you're going to see a lot more interest in our outdoor spaces. And so our future expansion plans are going to take a look at how do we create an environment that can double up as outdoor event space. And we'll be doing that on our rooftop too, with our new expansion, making sure that we have outdoor rooftop event space available.
That's really interesting and makes a lot of sense, and it is a significant change in direction because 6 or 8 years ago, again, several of your predecessors ago, the buzzword that everybody said was absolutely essential when we were talking about the football stadium and the new revised convention center. What was absolutely essential was a massive amount of contiguous space. And I think what you're saying now, and what I would anticipate just instinctively to be true, is that factor is probably going to be less important in the convention centers of the future than we thought it was going to be a decade ago. Is that true?
Could be. I still think contiguous space allows more flexibility. So imagine a loaf of bread. Instead of just having the two ends like we do now, if we have a full loaf, you can demise that space, and we could have 3 or 4 citywides at the same time, and we can be flexible with the amount of space that each user takes. That's kind of the advantage of having contiguous space. I think we'll still see. It's still something that is a competitive advantage that other convention centers have over ours, and so I think we'll still need that at some point, but maybe not as soon as next year.
Okay, and you showed on your chart the collapse or the cancellation of all the conventions for this budget year. As you're looking forward, how are we doing in terms of holding the conventions that are currently scheduled for the out years? What are you hearing about anticipated cancellations a year or 2 years from now?
I would say across the board, everyone wants to have their event and plans on having their event, even those scheduled for next calendar year, 2021. It's really a matter of what the state health department and the county health department decides. And so they need about 3 to 6 months to cancel an event. So as we get closer to the beginning of next year, folks are going to have to make a decision, and if it were today, they would cancel, just based on the county health orders. We do have some active clients that are, using their influence and participation on task forces and all to see if they can influence some way the governor's office and the county health department. But I think, mass gatherings are going to be the last ones to come back, and we certainly don't expect to be open before schools are open, let's say.
Right. Okay. You started off by demonstrating the significant hit that we've taken with TOT, and again, very sobering. When you look at almost $200 million, you're right, that is substantially more than many of our department's entire budgets. It's more than the reduction in the police department's budget that was so controversial this year. That loss alone was more than that. So I don't need to pin you down on this at all now, but I would like to ask if you have analyzed sort of best case, worst case, multi-year scenarios for recovery of that, or if there's sort of national industry-wide thinking about that. It would be very helpful for us on the budget side to be able to think in terms of best case, worst case. So if you can provide me with that offline if you'd like, but it is something that I'd like to explore with you.
It's a little bit of crystal ballism, right? So, but the industry experts and the economists that have been hired by our industry are all saying that it will take 3 years to get to pre-pandemic levels. So most forecasters have been straightlining the tourism visitation numbers and the revenue numbers and the economic impact numbers from a base, the worst case being this current year, and straightlining it to a 3-year recovery.
Okay, thank you. And finally, on the Convention Center's response to emergency needs right now. First of all, thank you for your incredible partnership on the meals program for seniors. It's been terrific and really has been helpful for people who need meals, also for those workers who are preparing the meals, and also for the drivers who are delivering. So it's fabulous success. And I am really pleased to hear that you're looking at safe parking with your big parking lots. It's critically important. Are you looking at any other options for utilizing space, at least in the short term, for homeless services? For example, temporary shelter while our A-Bridge home facilities are coming online over the next 6 months or the next year. Are there any opportunities that there may be there to get people under a roof in large numbers while we're still bringing those bridge housing sites online?
Yeah, our continuation of operations plans do offer our facilities for those type of uses, especially under natural disaster situation, but certainly for homelessness too. The problem we have, Councilman, is we're basically a shell of a building with very little amenities. So bathrooms and showers and things like that we learned in putting together the hospital surge facility, for instance, that we didn't have a lot of things that are just basic needs for something like a hospital. And then when we had the National Guard stay over for those 10 days, we had to rent portable showers and portable water facilities, and we just really don't have. It's difficult. We could do it in an emergency, but it won't be as ideal as, say, Project Roomkey, which has the appropriate air conditioning, plumbing, and other facilities that are required. But I forgot to mention one other creative alternative that the Convention Center has been looking at is alternative studio space for the film and TV industry. The new protocols that are coming out require social distancing and require more space than sometimes the soundstage will have. And so we've already booked a couple of productions, and we continue to get inquiries from people that are interested in, one was the Family Feud, for instance, was actually interested in using the entire West Hall at one point. I think they found an alternate space, but the entertainment productions are looking at larger spaces required under the new protocols.
Well, bravo, and thank you. You know that is an industry near to my heart, and you also know, I think, that a decade ago, the Convention Center was on everybody's top 10 list of the worst places to film in Southern California. And so it's come a long, long way since then, and especially under your leadership. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Krikorian, and thanks, Don, for your report. That concludes and wraps up. I'm reminded that if you look at how much of economic impact COVID-19, west of the Mississippi, LA has been hit the hardest because of these two industries, our trade and tourism industries that we heavily rely on. And as indicated, one in 9 jobs in both the port and also the tourism industry, and of course the passengers that come in and out of our airport. So really appreciate, we got work to do, and unless we move forward on identifying and establishing a vaccine or tracing measures, this is going to take longer than we anticipate. So hopeful that the medical field can move forward on creating a vaccine that we can feel more comfortable in getting together, so that we can move on our trade and tourism pieces, so industries. Anything else for the good of the order? I think that concludes what we'll do on this item. We'll continue it as we did with the other two. I do want to thank Mr. Soroka, Mr. Abachi for staying on through the entirety of today's committee hearing. I really appreciate your presence. And Mr. Liu, thanks again for your report. With that, that concludes our T3 agenda, and we're now adjourned. Thank you so much. Be safe.
Thanks very much, everyone. Thanks, Joe.
Thank you.